Start doing some scat. Not scat, like scatting. Gibbity boop ba ba. Good morning. We are live. And my first word out of my mouth was scat. Welcome to the Camera Life podcast, episode 43. It is the 19th of December. We're less than a week away from my imminent arrival down your chimneys. This episode, 43, it is the silly season. I am feeling a bit silly and tired. Brought to you by Lucky Camera Straps from Bendigo, Victoria, the maker of exceptionally fine leather camera straps. Good morning, Justin. Speaking of the devil.
Good morning. I am the devil.
You are the devil. Devil's in the detail. Good to be back. We've got a guest today. Just before we jump to our guest to hear what they have to say about today's show, I just want to welcome anyone watching along at home or listening later on our audio podcast. So the Camera Life podcast is available. All of our back catalogue is available on YouTube, and most of our episodes are also up on audio podcasts. So please make sure you like and subscribe and, tickle the bell in YouTube for notifications and that sort of thing. But let's jump to our guest. And also, sorry, just before we introduce Mark, stick around. We're going to talk about someone who's had an extensive career in photography, starting off with film photography, and currently works in volume photography with Arthur Reed Photos. And but there's much more to his story than just photographing school kids, and we're going to get to that in just a moment. So welcome, Mark.
Thank you, Greg. Thank you, Justin.
Good to have you.
Thank you. Good to
Now,
be
I think
here.
the very first question that I think we just very quickly need to address is, how do we pronounce your surname, and what are its origins?
It's very Dutch, and it's quite a unique name, even from Holland. It's not an obvious name, or not a very common name in Holland. But the pronunciation, or the anglicized pronunciation, is Bloothoofd. Bloothoofd.
Bloothoofd.
You can call me. You can just call me Mark. That's fine.
Is there a traditional pronunciation?
Yeah.
It's sort of more Bloothoofd.
Bloothoofd. So Bloothoofd.
So it comes from the back of the throat more.
Yeah, the Bloothoofd. But there's so many variations that I've heard growing up. My two boys are hearing lots of variations at their school, and
yeah, I'm sure they are. And
yes.
what? So it's very Dutch, but like, how many generations have you been in Australia? Your family?
I was born here, so Dad came out post World War II, 1952, and so I'm born and bred. Mum was Australian, so so I've got a bit of everything.
Oh, nice.
Oh, there's nothing wrong with that. We like a mixed bag of lollies.
That's it.
Now, just before we dive deep into your story, can you just give us a very quick synopsis about what it is that you do with your photography at the moment?
Oh gosh. Well, I'm a volume photographer. That's probably the short answer. I've done predominantly volume photography over my photographic career. Mm-hmm. So I've been photographing for over 30 years, and for over 20 years I've been actually judging at camera clubs, and more recently I've been ramping my judging up. Enjoy the process of going to clubs and meeting members and seeing lots of work and just being surrounded by photography and photographers and imagery and so forth as well.
Yeah. Just quickly on the volume photography thing, for those that don't know, and also me a little bit, I understand what you mean in terms of school photography. So that'd be going into schools and literally taking photos of every single child for the traditional school photo. What other types of volume photography? Are there other types? And what other types do you guys do?
Look, absolutely. As a company, we've covered sort of everything related to volume photography. So kindergarten photography, childcare photography, team sport photography.
Are there any like corporate workplace? Is that ever a thing? Like big workplace stuff, or is that not really that common?
We've done a little bit of that. We do probably corporate work in schools. So occasionally we'll go into a school and photograph, their principal teams and things like that in a more corporate, manner, if you like. We've done.
What's your role within that organisation for volume photography at Arthur Reed?
I started from the ground, but at the moment I'm the photographic manager. So I
so you
manage the
run,
photographic department.
Okay.
So you
run
lead a team of about 35 people, is that
I
right?
do. Yeah, actually, next
Yep.
year we've got a team that'll be starting in the start of next year of over 40 photographers,
Wow.
Nice.
and that's one of the
awesome
really
to hear.
yeah, it's one of the really one of the things that I think has kept me in the industry. Other people, other photographers that I work with, because we're all, in a workplace, you have diverse characters, of course, and some of them
Yeah.
are there under duress, if you like, or whatever. But and maybe even at Arthur Reed, but all our photographers, for the most part, have a photographic interest and or background. Which makes it, I love it. It's fantastic, and the diversity of photography and photographers we have is really, really inspiring, and that's something that I really enjoy.
It's interesting because a few of our past guests have more recently entered sort of the volume photography market, more as kind of seasonal. When it's their usual gigs off time, they do some seasonal work around, especially around debs and graduations for universities and high schools and those sorts of things, which is really interesting.
Three or four guests over the past few months that have all said, and these are very creative, experienced photographers. And not only were they sort of doing this, most of them seem to be doing it as a newer thing, started in the last few years as a secondary source of income, I guess. But they also all said that they were enjoying it. They were really enjoying the work. It wasn't just like, oh, I'm just doing this because I need to make some extra money. They were loving the challenge of trying to bring kids out of their shell and all that sort of stuff. It's been quite an interesting theme that's popped up.
Yeah, I've listened to a few of those episodes. It's actually been really nice to hear that, and I think our photographers over the years have changed from, in some cases, sort of entry level photographers, enthusiasts, hobbyists, that kind of thing, right through to more recently freelancers and full blown professionals. Like we're actually putting on 2 fashion photographers, and because I employ and go through the whole process. And looking at their resume, looking at their websites, the first thing I say when I phone screen or talk to them is, "You're overqualified for what we do," And so that's fascinating. But they say that's fine. There's no issue with that as well.
Yeah.
And look, there's a lot of people can assume that I suppose volume photography is not creative. You have to be creative in lots of different ways, not just photographically. And
that's what we've heard from past guests as well. That a photo is a photo, but it's how you engage and connect with every individual for the brief moment that you have with them.
100%.
That makes the world of difference. Just before we roll back the tape a bit and learn a bit more about your early inspirations, I do have to apologize to everyone. I've got to step out for a minute. I've got something important to take care of. I'm actually going to do a quick delivery to Bendigo with Justin's Christmas present.
Awesome.
But I will be back. So I'll leave you in Justin's more than capable hands. I mean, he is the boss after all. But yes, I will be back in a moment, and we'll keep going from there. Talk soon.
Well, we'll keep on digging. I just want to find out a little bit about, before we'll dig into your story once Greg gets back. But tell me about, like, what do you look for if a photographer is looking to come and work in your team? What you're saying that there's some people that you're thinking are overqualified. What level of experience do you usually like to someone to have? Are you looking for people with uni degrees, previous experience in certain styles of photography? What sort of training do you offer for people? Are there ways to work your way into the industry? Tell me a little bit about it.
Good question, Justin. So look, we look for people. Look, photography is an important part of the process because there's a technical element to the job, and photography is that. There's troubleshooting and all those kind of things that are really important. And the photographic eye, the ability to look at a subject and work out what's right, what's wrong, and all those kind of things, or technically looking at the lighting or the camera, or something like that. So photography is an important part of it, from a technical point of view, but from a creative point of view, from the eye of the photographer, that they all become really, really important. As far as beyond that, it has to be personality.
Okay.
Because we have employed photographers that on paper are really prolifically experienced, but the question we always ask: can you work with a shy 5-year-old? You know,
Mhm.
if
Yeah,
you can't work with,
exactly.
you know, if you can go out and win AIPP awards and you know, whatever it might happen to be, but you can't deal with that prep child, then, you know, you won't get a look in. So we
Yeah.
do look for personality as well.
Is it just your experience that discerns that? Like, how do you find out if I would be able to work with kids in those situations? Like, do you just have a conversation with me and you can get a feel for it, or do you sort of give them a test run, or like what? How does it
Yeah,
work?
that's a good question. Look, I think first impressions do count. So you know,
Oh, Justin.
Oh, hey, I'm a great first impression error.
so you know, I mean, obviously we run a CCAD, and we're pretty proud at the way that we do our ad. We paint a really clear picture of what we do. We've actually created a video that's in our CCAD as well. It's little
Nice.
sort of it's not
Sorry,
it's
what's
not
a
a promo.
CCAD?
It's like
Yeah,
a seek ad. You know,
Oh,
well,
CCAD. I thought you said
yeah.
CCAD.
That's what I
no.
thought first too. I was like, "Oh, what's a CCAD?
Yeah.
That sounds scientific."
So
or
seek
like
the
It
something.
does.
employment.
Sorry. Yep.
I
Yep.
thought the
Yeah,
same thing.
It's
so
the
we
Dutch
had.
in you.
That's it. So we've created a video that is kind of it's not a promotion of the business. It's telling people what we do and how we do it and what we look for in people, and try and tell people that, you know, this isn't glamorous work. You know, there are some schools that, you know, some of the elite private schools that we have the good fortune to go and photograph are just, you know, stupendly, if that's such a word, beautiful. You know, the buildings and it's the grounds and all those
Yeah.
kind of things as well. But it can be downright hard work. There's no question of that. You know, there's pressure, there's conditions that are less than the ideal sometimes, and sometimes the kids are, you know, not supervised at the level that we would like, and so forth, and that can make it a bit of a challenge. So we do look for those qualities of people that can deal in pressure, can deal with people, and troubleshoot and think on their feet and all that kind of thing. I mean, I've seen plenty of graduates or people that have studied and you know, got that piece of paper, but I don't consider that highly, to be perfectly honest. I respect it, but for what we do, it's not the be all and end all. We want
It's one
photographers.
element, isn't it?
It is, absolutely, yeah. So anyone that has, you know, as they nickname it in the industry, hospo experience, you understand pressure, you understand customer service, you understand the need to change gears and move. You know, and that's there's parallels there with what we do.
Yeah. And so at the moment, Mark, you lead a team at Arthur Reed Photography, or Photos, sorry. Do you actually get to do many of the shoots yourself? Are you still active on the ground, or are you?
I am, yeah. So I've got a team around me, you know, that support myself and our department, and we all actively photograph, particularly in our peak season. Our industry is extremely seasonal, unfortunately. As soon as we went digital, schools decided that they needed their photos, or our photos that we take, you know, for their internal purposes. Digital was a blessing and a curse. A lot of photos are used for, you know, internal purposes, ID cards and intranet. You know, a lot of teachers will have apps for attendance. Those photos are used in that, and on it goes. So we have a lot of schools that you know, need photos, you know, sort of in the first part of the year, or, you know, literally day one. You know, term one kind of thing. So yeah, I am actively photographing as well. So I'm trying to get that kid in front of me to smile, and then deal with crises at other schools and whatever else.
Yeah, it must be a
that's
handful.
good fun. Never dull.
Just jump to a couple of comments here.
Yeah, that's exactly. Hey, we're like
look at
mind
us,
melding this morning. We're right on top of it. I was just going to.
Santa knows if you've been naughty or nice.
Elena's in the comments. She says, "Morning all."
Morning, Elena.
Paul Henderson from Bendigo. Morning, folks.
Hey, Paul. G'day, mate.
And Jim, who's normally on the podcast, who's not today because he's packing 600 million camera straps to try and get them all over the world by Christmas. I think he's also looking after his daughter today too. But, you know, he's good at multitasking. So jump in the comments, people, if you got any questions, comments, anything.
Yeah.
Throw them in there.
Good morning, guys. Morning, Jim. Yeah, speaking of delivery, I just want to segue for a second there. I was going to ask you how things are going with the orders for Lucky Straps, but I was just telling the boys before we went live that I'm in Melbourne, in central Melbourne, in South Yarra, and I ordered a product from Queensland, and apparently Melbourne's distribution and delivery centre for the Australia Post is so overrun that they sent my parcels and a bunch of other stuff from other people I know to Perth to be processed, of all places. So yeah, I
Yep.
don't know when I'm going to see that stuff. And that was meant to be express post. So, you know.
Yeah. That's the hot tip for everyone this time of year. If you can afford it, if you have to order anything online, obviously now you're probably too late anyway.
Yeah, you're cooked.
But any time basically in December, I will always pay for express post upgrade from anything to go anywhere, because when things get crazy at Australia Post, they always prioritise express post. It'll still take longer, but they'll always prioritise that over regular post. So
yeah, they'll send it to Perth straight away.
That's right, rapidly to Perth and then back across.
It got to
hopefully
Perth in 24 hours.
Yeah.
Yep.
It's been a busy season.
That's good. That's really good. Good to hear.
Good. Yeah. Anyway, back to Mark.
Yeah, Mark, sorry about that sloppy segue.
No, segues are good.
But let's dial back a little bit and talk about your first inspirations in photography. You started like us. You started in, oh no, Justin didn't, but I started in film photography in art school, very, very long time ago. In a dark room, processing and printing my own photos. I imagine it was similar for you. Take us back to when you first were introduced to photography, and what was that experience like for you?
I'm a child of the 70s. So I was raised on a very healthy dose of Spielberg and Lucas and, you know, the fantastic blockbusters and movies of that time. So my interest was probably initially more in film and so forth. And I used to run around with a Super 8 camera with trusty Kodachrome Super 8 film.
Yep.
It's still in the box, unused. So I was a budding little filmmaker.
Wow.
Used to do animations with friends and all that kind of thing. So I had aspirations to sort of go into, you know, that sort of industry.
Yeah.
Photography, I was in year 8 and my parents gave me their point and shoot to take on camp. And I took a series of photos and every one of them was out of focus and terrible. But I still look at those photos every now and then, and it doesn't matter. They still, you know, sort of trigger a memory and all that kind of thing.
Yeah, and they taught you something.
Yes, absolutely. And then year 12 came along, and I had the choice of doing some sort of more practical, hands-on subjects in sort of the art realm, and filmmaking was one component, but photography was the other. And I kind of fell in love with photography at that point. And it really embraced it, particularly at school. And as you said before, Greg, I spent a lot of time in the darkroom. I really that whole tactile experience of shooting film. And let me see if I have my very first camera that I learnt on. So there's a bit of props today. So the old
no, it's good. We love a prop.
The old trusty K1000 there I used. So I learned on that. Yeah, great camera, and spent a lot of time in the dark room and really embraced it. And then I kind of and then went into photography. I actually then picked up a job as a school photographer very soon after leaving school, and sort of haven't looked back. But over the course of you know the last X amount of years, I have flipped between film and video and photography. I actually ended up doing I studied when I first so after I left school I studied photography. I enrolled into the New York Institute of Photography. They had so this is pre-digital. This was the old school version of an online course.
Wow.
So it was a correspondence course.
Yeah.
Nice.
So they sent you they sent you the materials, you know, booklets, and they had VHS tapes for you to watch bits and pieces and whatever else.
Really? They'd send you tapes?
Yeah, it was fantastic.
Oh, and so you would send your work back over?
Yep. Yeah, they actually had an office here in Australia, so you'd send your your photography, your assignments, if you like, to I think it was in New South Wales, and then the lecturer or the tutor would send your work back with an audio tape with a critique.
That is awesome.
Oh, wow.
It literally is. It's an online course, but just through the mail.
Analog,
so
just
good.
literally analog. That's so cool.
So that was great. I really enjoyed that. And I still have the materials now. And even at the time, I looked at them, and it was all the reference photos and all the materials were all from the 70s. So this was in the 90s, so it was 20 years old, and it was dated really badly. But the core of the information was fantastic, and I learned a lot. But then, of course, I was working at the same time as doing the correspondence course, and I was learning a bucket load on the job as well.
Well,
and then fast track.
Sorry, I was just going to jump in and say, just to add a little glossary for the kids watching along at home, a VHS tape was an old recording medium that people would record videos on, and you would go to the local milk bar and rent movies on VHS tape and could take them home and watch them. I still remember that so vividly, that scanning the VHS aisles at like Blockbuster in the early days, or even and before Blockbuster, it was like at the local milk bar. And then
I used to go and get there was always deals. You could get say 4 weeklies and one new release for a deal. So you'd just be like cruising around the store just trying to find your 4 weeklies.
But it would only be like $10 or something. Like it wouldn't be.
And you walk out with this stack like this. You're like,
and they'd have the shop. It's a bit like a modern day video game store where all the cassettes are on display. And then if you were returning it and it was out of hours, there was like in a library, there was a slot where you dropped your tapes in.
Yeah. I reckon, because I'm just judging by the comments that we get on this show, I would say almost everyone listening to this show has been into a video rental store, not a DVD rental store, a video rental store. But if anyone is out there that has never been inside a video rental store, comment please.
Let us know.
We'd like to hear from you, you weirdo.
And the audio cassette, the audio cassette that Mark's referring to was a smaller. It's like the size of a pack of cigarettes.
Surely everyone knows those.
Well, I don't know. I don't know who's watching. I mean, my kids sometimes watch this, and they've only known digital. Oh, I know my older kids. Yeah. My older kids know VHS and DVD.
Oh, don't play around, Jim. You know what a bloody video rental store is.
Yeah. You used to go to the curtain section, Jim. There was always a curtain section everywhere for that.
In the back.
Yeah.
In the back.
So, Mark, just to get back on track, all of a sudden we're talking about adult movies. When you started thinking about, making your own films, with your what was it, a Super 8?
Yeah, Super
8 film camera. What was it that you said that the movies inspired you, but what do you think it was about it that made you want to actually try and create your own work?
I really loved movies. I really loved watching movies and the experience and the imagination and the escapism. And I suppose I wanted to create that my own, and share that with other people and all that kind of thing. I think that was kind of the motivation. I just really enjoyed, the power that film has to transport you and fire your imagination and things like that. And so I attempted to do that myself, and particularly with the Super 8 camera, and then later with the video camera as well.
Yeah.
Do you have any all-time favorite movies?
Oh gosh, it does change, but the cliche for me was probably the blockbusters. The Star Wars trilogy and Indiana Jones trilogy. E.T. Very heavily influenced in my youth by Lucas and Spielberg.
Yeah,
and then as I matured, I then started to look at Scorsese and De Palma and some of those really classic sort of 60s and 70s directors that weren't sort of the blockbuster guys, but made quality films.
I remember Spielberg. Was it Close Encounter?
Yes.
That movie scared me because it just felt so real at the time. I was only young. I'm 51 now, so but it just blew me away. And the way that the dad was building the plateau in his lounge room with the clay. Was it clay or mashed potato?
Can't remember.
Like, it was my first experience of seeing someone that was really losing their mind. There was so much, it was so compelling and powerful. But yeah, like you, big Star Wars here, and Indiana Jones, like, just absolutely love that. I remember my mum took me to see the first one in the cinema. I think it was one of the first movies I ever saw in a cinema. And pretty compelling stuff. Like it, and I wonder, Mark, do you think that escapism and that wonder and whimsy that movies used to instill in us, do you think that that's gone now? Do you think that it's been dissolved by the mass volume of content that we're exposed to?
I think it's still there if you want it. I think there's still some fantastic stuff being produced, movies and TV shows, and I think one thing that I've noticed, since those, the good old days, if you like, of those
days,
of those big blockbusters, I think is like the TV shows. There was this whole sort of not exodus, but there was a move from the quality, movie makers that went into TV to make the long form TV shows. Game of Thrones was the one that sort of stood out to me as being one of those first ones, real quality, high budget, exceptional. But I think I think if we, the whole Gen X thing, if we talk about, the music stars of the 80s and so forth as well, they were big, and it's because you didn't have, I suppose the 80s you started to have a broader range of artists and so forth. But at the moment we have such a broad way to consume content that I think it can be lost, because people are watching films on their phones, on their laptops and whatever else. And for me, the grandeur of a cinema and the sound and the picture and the overwhelming senses and so forth was a part of the experience. And if you're going to work and watching a film on your phone or something like that, or traveling or whatever it is, you lose that. You lose that. The gift and the magic of that. It's one part of it, but it's unbiased.
Do you think that also applies to photography these days? Because we've often talked about on this show about who are we taking? Sorry, Justin, who we are taking photos for, and why are we taking photos? Why do we shoot? And how are we showing our work? And is it postage stamp size grabs that we flick past in half a second? Yeah. Do you think photography's lost its magic?
Again, I think it's there if you want to grab that. It's definitely there. Like for me, I present and judge at camera clubs, and one of the things in one of my presentations, I do talk about slowing down, get off your phone, go to an exhibition, stand in front of an image on a wall and just pause for a moment, as opposed to the constant scrolling. I think it's there, but you've got to work a bit harder. I encourage people, to look at photography books. Just slow down, absorb, take your time. I think social media's got its place, and particularly for photography and so forth. But it can happen too quick, and you can lose that. So I think there is. My suggestion to anyone is just to pause and enjoy, where you can. We live in such a fast-paced world; it's crazy.
Yeah. Well, the other thing that I've found lately, scrolling through Instagram, I try to follow artists, illustrators, because I used to be a sort of artsy when I was in art school. Funny that. The amount of times I have to stop and consider: is this AI or is this real? And I'm seeing it with photographies too. And even some videos fool you for a couple of seconds. The quick ones, the reels that pop up. And you think, oh, that's really fun. And then something happens and it morphs, and you see a telltale sign that this is AI. And you think, oh, man, I was fooled. I feel dumb. I feel stupid for being fooled by, by this sort of robotic process. But, and I think that'll continue to be a big challenge for us in this craft, is having, making our work stand out to be differentiated from AI generated content. But it's a real challenge.
I'm actively trying to stand out by making my photos worse, because then people will be like, well, that can't be AI.
Yeah, AI
it couldn't possibly be that bad.
No. And also, folks, just on that, speaking of bad photography, Justin won't be showing us his 12 images this week. Every week, for those of you new to the show or haven't tuned in for a while or have missed this segment, every week towards the end of our show, Justin shares his photo essay assignment for the week. He set himself a challenge to produce a photo essay or a set of 12 images each week with some sort of storytelling element to them. And it's been an absolute pleasure watching Justin stress over these challenges, but deliver some really, really compelling photojournalistic style shots. Now, unfortunately, Justin won't be sharing this week's work because there is no work this week.
No.
He's been far too busy being a lucky strap man.
Yes.
So
Yeah,
we will forgive him.
And
It's
it wasn't
Christmas. We'll be
I
generous.
probably had time to do it. I didn't have the mental bandwidth to do it. And it was just one of those things where I had to make a call, and I decided rather than half-ass it just to say that I did it, because I think this would have been week 8. I decided I need to take a little break over the holiday period, and I'll get back started into it early Jan. So, which is a shame, because it would have been awesome to have someone like Mark critique my images, but if he'd critiqued this week's images, he probably would have gone, "Yeah, nice one." It's anyway.
Yep.
So yeah,
Let's Justin, do you want to go on? Sorry,
I was just going to say. So the lesson I've learned this week is it's good to challenge yourself, and it's okay sometimes if you aren't able to live up to the challenge. There's always tomorrow.
I was talking to the boys before the show, and I said, sorry, boys, the men, the lads, the blokes. I said that I haven't picked up a camera in probably a month to actually do anything. I've been writing about photography. I've been very busy with work writing about photography, but I just haven't been out with a camera, and I think that's okay too. You know, I've got responsibilities for work. I've got bills to pay. So we'll get there eventually. Hopefully I'll take some time off over Christmas and try and just make sure I've always got a camera on me. Do you want to jump to some comments there, Justin?
A couple of quick comments just from Philip Johnson. Says, good morning. Morning, Philip. And,
morning, Philip. Where are you from, Philip? Let us know in the comments.
And Frog says he's an apology today. He must be busy too. Frog from Tasmania. He's a fellow bee fopper.
Yeah.
And he said he's in and out and will catch up later, but he seconds the minutes of the last meeting. And another good morning.
Thanks, David.
Lauren. Morning.
Morning, Lauren. Where are you calling? Oh, sorry, where are you watching from? Calling from. Hello, caller.
Caller. Hello, caller.
And Jim has said, where are all the Davids?
Yeah, last week we had 4 Davids in the comments.
We did have 4 Davids. And I started even calling our guest, Levin, I started calling him David.
Mark, you do a lot of stuff related to photography, like a lot. It's your job. It's been your job for a long time. Be it presenting at camera clubs, judging awards. Do you go through periods, seasons where you're using your camera for personal stuff, and then when you don't pick it up, you look back and it's been 6 months since you used a camera for something not work related? Like, do you go through those periods of time?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I'm lucky in my job that I'm constantly photographing, constantly around photographers, constantly, around photography. And I suppose I always try and put my personal touch into what I do professionally, but I really enjoy photography for myself. And yeah, there can be absolute times where I'm not photographing as much as I would like, but I'm married, with a family, 2 boys, and they're high school age now, which is easier. But those
in some ways.
Yeah, well, that's right. Yeah, but when I started, I was very fortunate to be working with some somewhat like-minded people. They were photographers, so I suppose they were like-minded in that point of view. But I was drawn to sort of nature, landscape photography, and so forth. And a few of those key people I work with and who trained me and sort of mentored me, if you like, were very much in that vein. And one of the things with school photography is that you have to go to the schools. So, and it's we're a Geelong-based company, but we travel everywhere. And back when I started, we did a lot of regional Victoria and quite a bit of interstate work as well. And it would literally be put the work camera down, pick up your personal camera, and go and explore. And that was one of the wonderful things with with country runs, just exploring. And just driving aimlessly and hoping for something, particularly pre-internet. You didn't really have that resource to look up where what things were and so forth. So we'd be driving around trying to chase the sun as it was setting, and there's something, quick handbrake turn, and then turn around and stop and jump the fence and get chased by a bull and take some photos and all that kind of thing. So my first few years, that was my life, going away with work quite a bit and just embracing the people I was working with and going for it. So what I do now, though, is that we have a close Facebook group for our photographers, and we have a monthly photographic competition where we have a set subject. And so the idea is to encourage our photographers to photograph in that month for that theme, and we just put it up there and have a look at them. And there's there'll be someone within the circle or external will basically critique the images and choose a first, second, third, and you get bragging rights. But
do you get to compete in that, or because you're the boss, you it's like it's not really fair if you just win every month?
12 of Mark's photos in this year's calendar. Who would have thought? What are the odds?
Well, the images are they're anonymous to the person that's critiquing them. They don't know.
That's cool.
So yeah,
that's
I really enjoy that, because
that's really fun.
That gives me and the others too, hopefully, an incentive to get out and photograph. And the idea is to definitely get them out photographing outside of work. I'm a great believer in that the skills that you bring from your personal photography translate into what we do professionally, and vice versa. I'm very, very big on that. It doesn't matter what field you're in. If you throw yourself into the volume photography that you do, there are skills that are very, very transferable. So,
and I think it also prevents you falling into a rut of doing the same thing every day in and out without much thought. If you're going out maybe on your weekends because you want to get the shot this weekend for the calendar, for work, or for whatever that extra inspiration to go and do something personal is, I think it offers you a little mind break and a creative break from the day-to-day. And not to say that creativity isn't involved, because as you said, everyone brings their own little creative elements to a volume photography, but it does help to just keep the mind limber, the creative mind limber. But yeah, a couple of things I just wanted to touch on. One, Justin, I think we should do a Lucky Straps calendar next year.
A calendar?
And we'll invite our podcast guests to submit images, and we'll judge them. And then you will pay for a calendar to be printed for everyone.
No, we'll just make one calendar.
Yeah, just one. We'll just share it around month by month.
Yeah. That's not a bad idea. I wonder if, but what about maybe people in the chat could submit too? That would get complicated.
Yeah, maybe anyone.
That'd be fun. That'd be fun. Yeah. But then we'd need a whole year of that before we do the calendar for the next year.
It'll be for next year. Well, it's too late to do one for next year.
It's a long project.
Yeah, well, I'm trying to secure my future employment. See?
Yeah.
Another 12 months.
Mark, off the top of your head, if you can remember, are there a couple of examples of those themes that come up for those monthly competitions that you can think of?
So the winner of the last month's competition chooses a set subject.
That's cool. Yep.
Yeah. I encourage them to pick something that's generally fairly generic, so it doesn't exclude people. So they, I can't get to, I can't get into the city to photograph architecture or whatever it might happen to be, sort of thing. So, last month we had shadows. It's, sometimes it's open. I think next, at the moment for December, January, it's color and light. We don't have definitions. It's very relaxed. It's just get out and photograph. Whether it can be on your phone, doesn't matter. Just get out and photograph.
But I think I like those looser guidelines, because when you tell someone to go out and shoot architecture, that's one thing. But to go out and tell someone go look for light, or show me contrast, or show me color at play in nature, even, or just color at play. It takes you back to the very, very fundamental things of photography, of how you see light, shadow, color, tone, all those sorts of elements. I think it's really great. Mark, you raised a point earlier that I wouldn't mind exploring just a little bit, because it is something that we often come across here, and it relates back to social media. You talked about how in the early days, you'd be driving for work and you would just happen to see something. You weren't able to research it. You weren't following a set of influencers on YouTube or Instagram who, let's face it, they're great, and they point out areas that are worth going to, but they kind of already capture the Instagrammable moment. While yes, they might influence you to go somewhere, say somewhere in Japan or somewhere in regional Victoria to take a shot of something similar or the same place, there is, I think, a lot to be said for just heading in a direction with your camera and seeing what you come across, as opposed to, I've just Instagrammed this and I found it on Google Maps and I've pinned it and I've, I know where I'm going to stop for coffee, on, like just heading out on a creative adventure without any real plans. I don't think it's something that we do so much anymore. We often get out with groups, with clubs, photo walks, BFOP. But I think there's still a lot to be said for just getting lost with your camera. And I think it's something that we're kind of losing. We're relying too much on, again, social media telling us where we should go and photograph things sometimes. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, no, I agree with that because, I've done exactly, that, just, driving, walking aimlessly and just, looking for elements that make for a great image, not so much the location that has to be ticked off the bucket list and so forth as well. I really love the technology that we have available to us now. It's democratized so many creative pursuits. But I'm really glad that I've gone through, dare I say, the analog pre-digital, kind of way of photography in particular. I mean, you'd sort of have a bit of an idea of, all right, well, if I go here, I might come across something. Like even now, I probably still maybe don't do enough research if I'm going to a location to find out what's there. I just kind of let that mystery evolve. Maybe I'm missing out. Maybe maybe I need to do a little bit more research. And I do. I mean,
it's interesting, isn't it? I mean, there's benefits to both approaches. I remember some of my earlier trips to Japan. I would have a whole regime set up, and I would have Google Maps, and I would star the locations on Google Maps here at home, doing my research of interesting places to go and photograph, and create folders of different things, and that was great because I got to see the stuff that I really wanted to see. And, it's not like you can just head to Japan next weekend, if only. You've got to make the most of the opportunity. So I didn't want to miss out. But then in some of my later trips, I would often just, with my Suica card, my rail card, I would just jump on a random train and get off 15 minutes later at wherever it stopped and just wander. And they were some of my best photographic experiences. And dare I say, some of the better shots that I got that weren't, Instagrammable influencer. Everyone's got a shot of Shibuya Scramble Crossing. It was far more unique for me that way.
Well, I traveled through Europe in my 20s, and pretty much did the same thing. I remember jumping on trains and just, okay, let's get off here. Don't know where it is, don't know what's happening, and just walking around villages and towns and cities, and so if I think back to some of my more favorite images from that time, was exactly just those happy little accidents.
I like that. And in fact, on my very first trip to Japan, I arrived late at night. I was staying right smack in the middle of Shibuya and in Tokyo, and I had a half-day bus tour the next day to see the sights, right? And we spent the first hour and a half just traveling from hotel to hotel to pick up everyone that was going on the tour. And along the way, I was seeing all these amazing things. They weren't on our list to see. They were just happened to be along the way between hotels. And I ended up getting off the bus and trying to communicate to the tour guide and the driver that I was okay. I was going to walk. I didn't want to be on the bus anymore because I felt like I was missing the best parts of Tokyo for me, not the stuff that all the tourists wanted to go and see. And there was a very loud couple on the side. Can we stop for coffee? And it was just doing my head in. So I just got off the bus and went, no, I'm fine. I couldn't speak Japanese and they didn't speak much English, and just disappeared for hours, and ended up coming across things that I hadn't put on my Google Maps.
I think that's the way to do it. That's how I roll. I'm not a researcher in terms of photo spots. Never really appeals to me. I think it means you miss out on some of those epic shots, but you find something else, that just comes across your path. That's why we always try and rent a scooter if we can, if it's safe enough in wherever we're going to go to Vietnam, and rent a scooter and just head off towards that way and just see what you find, you know.
Yeah. Yeah, it's
I
very
remember
cool.
when after I sort of went through all my images after my European trip, obviously it was a film-based adventure. I sort of put them all together and had I was shooting transparency slide film and obviously prints and black and whites and color and the whole lot. And so when I eventually sort of got the images together to show my family, firstly, it dawned on me after showing all these images that I personally really liked, that most of them were not recognizable to a country or a town or a city or anything. That most of them were just about either moments or shape or color or contrast, all those things you mentioned before, Greg, and just sort of, I didn't chase the cliche things to photograph, which I think are important and they play a place. There's no doubt about that. But my personal favorite images were more about something that I found, particularly interesting, other than a monument or whatever it may happen to be.
Yeah.
Very true. That's exactly it.
Very true.
And then,
Justin, you want to jump on a
translate? Yeah.
Sorry.
No, go on.
No, you go. Sorry, I interrupted you, mate.
I was just going to say, sometimes those images then translate beyond just countries, spots. It's real life, and it's
the human experience.
The human experience, similar but different in another country. It's always you think when you travel, you're supposed to be able to, like you say, tell what country you're in and this is where we were and stuff like that. But sometimes that stuff just gets in the way.
But I was specifically, telling my family, now this was in Germany, this was in Holland, or this was wherever it was. And then, the images were not obvious to those places at all. And I thought, that's really interesting.
Yeah,
I think it's cool.
I like that more. Yeah, I do. Justin, do you want to jump on a couple of comments?
Yeah. Well, we've got locations. Lauren's in the Southern Highlands.
Is that Southern Highlands of Scotland or Victoria?
I was just going to breeze past that because I was like, I don't know where is that, like
Lauren,
near us? Or?
Lauren, let's narrow it down, please.
Which country? Which hemisphere? And Philip,
20 questions.
Philip Johnson's in what's that? Katoomba? In the Blue Mountains?
Yeah, I used to have family in Katoomba.
Monique Weir says, morning all. Mark judged our Camera Club comp. Definitely the best judge of the year.
Oh, go, Mark.
But not the decade, but the year. That's still pretty good. Great constructive advice. Looks beyond the technical. Love it. What Camera Club was that, Monique?
Yeah, let us know.
Monique is at Williamstown.
Oh,
nice.
Yeah, nice. I've met Monique before, and had a good chat with her. And thanks, Monique. That's really nice.
That's lovely. I'll be coming to your Camera Club in February, Monique, to give a talk about the ethics of photography. Stay tuned for that. Halfway between Sydney and Canberra.
Yeah, right. Okay. So Australia, Highlands, right.
Yeah.
Paul Henderson says, what's that mean?
Maybe jumped off the bus
at the traffic lights in St. Petersburg to wander the streets and take some snaps. Hope we could find the hotel later without reading Russian. Yeah, that's cool. Get lost. You just get lost and you figure it out later. And hopefully you don't end up in jail.
Getting lost in Russia doesn't feel quite so safe as getting lost in Tokyo. Yeah. But anyway.
Me Pop Now says that's an excellent idea, not shooting the landmarks. Yeah, I almost never shoot landmarks. It's just, I don't know, just doesn't really appeal to me. I always think someone else has probably done this better. So if I shoot a landmark, it's usually got Yelena in it or something, just to be like, hey, this is us, we're here. Like
Yelena's the landmark.
Yeah, she is the landmark. I just take her wherever and just pop her in front of.
That's the only reason you let her hang around. Really, you just need subject matter for your photos.
Yeah, she's my landmark.
Good on you, Elena.
The drunk wedding photographer is in the chat from California. He is a film wedding photographer.
Yep.
He shoots his weddings on film. Mark, do you still shoot film? And if you do, what sort of cameras and film are you rocking these days?
I don't shoot film anymore, to be honest.
Okay. Too inconvenient, or just like prefer digital? Why don't you shoot film anymore?
Oh gosh, I think from a professional point of view, it was at times extremely stressful. Or it could be extremely stressful.
So you
I'll
got
show
a bit
you.
of PTSD from
Well,
from
yeah. So this is this is the work camera that we used. So this is
wow, look at that thing.
I'm holding. Yeah. So it's a Nikon
Just
F3.
Describe it for the listeners. Yeah.
Yeah. So it's a Nikon F3.
Holy moly!
What?
Which has got what we call a 250 back, and the 250 back would hold basically a cassette with 250 frames on it.
Oh, that is
So-
awesome. David, the drunk wedding photographer, needs one of those. He could do his whole day on one, just
250 frames.
So
not change film.
That's the cassette, and that's actually got film in it. So there's 250 exposures in there.
That's wild.
And so you'd have to do constant checks. You're just taking up, making sure that the motor drive was actually pulling the film and so forth and whatever else. In fact, we back in the film days, in our so every school term, we would allocate X amount of days for retakes because there were going to be technical problems where the film didn't transport, it got it got light leak or whatever else, or was damaged in the processing part and so forth as well. Where now digital just doesn't allow that. It's a good question. I think because it's interesting when we went to digital cameras for school photos.
Fujifilm, by the way.
Yeah, Fujifilm. What have I got here?
Is that what you guys use for the whole company?
No, when we first went digital, we went to Fujifilm. So we
don't act so surprised, Justin. They can shoot volume.
It would be an odd choice. I would be an odd choice. I'm just saying.
You just made the list.
We shot with the Fuji S1, the S2, the S3, and then the S5. They were our weapons of choice. But unfortunately, film stocks, the technology of film at the sort of the late 90s, early 2000s were peak. They were fantastic. The skin tones and the softness and the warmth was beautiful. Really, really stunning. And then we went to digital, and we took 3 steps back.
Yeah,
it was almost disheartening, to be honest. And it was like we had to make the change to digital because of the products that the industry required and schools and so forth. Yeah. But the quality dropped for a few years. Like when so all our portrait work were done on 35mm film, and then our group photography was all done on medium format cameras. So we used to use a Bronica 645, and the clarity and whatever else. And then the quality then dropped. But over the years, I've just kind of embraced, I suppose, each generational change with the digital, revolution and so forth.
Past guest of ours, Jason Lau, who he's of a similar generation as us, and he started on film and then jumped to digital pretty much straight away as soon as digital was available. He ended up going back to film for a few years to wait for digital to bake properly because it just wasn't at the same resolution or standards or color as film wasn't.
It was a very steep learning curve.
Yeah. Well, that too. Yeah.
One of our so we photographed graduations back in the day, and we shot on film, and we would have other providers, so we had competition. And I remember in particular they shot on medium format film for their graduation portraits and so forth, and their work was always stunning. I mean, we use good film stock, and our results were fine too, of course. But he got sponsorship from Kodak and went to one of the very first Kodak cameras and started photographing all the graduates. And I just remember seeing his sample photos, thinking, "Wow, it's not there. It's not there at all," compared to because he was shooting medium format in particular.
Format film,
I think. I think the cost of film is probably a little bit prohibitive as well, in my mind. I think digital, has democratized that. Like I used to shoot a lot of slide film, and that was expensive back in the day. Although I did shoot the lovely Kodachrome 64, which was fantastic. That was, it was more of a domestic film, but it was prepaid, so the cost of the film included the processing and the mounting. And
Really?
so inside this little box, so this is a collector's item, obviously. There's a little envelope that you would then put the film in, and it was prepaid, and it would go to, I think it would go to Coburg, and then it would be processed, and then all the slides would be then mounted, and then sent back for your for your slide projector.
Isn't that crazy?
Yeah,
That's very cool.
Yeah, it is.
And so, a couple of things. Next time I'm in Geelong and out your way, can I drop by and play with all your fun cameras and toys?
absolutely.
I think you've got a better collection than Justin.
Steal everything in that office.
No. I just want to hang out for a bit and play. We're going to have a play date. How many cameras do you have, Mark?
Well, in front of me, I've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. So I've only got 11 in front of me at the moment.
Wow. That's
Yeah,
impressive.
Right. We used the old trusty Polaroid.
Oh, yes.
Yes.
Nice.
We used that. We actually used that to photograph a class group, and then staple that Polaroid to a piece of paper with back row, middle row, front row for the teachers then to fill out the names of the kids.
Oh, nice.
Ah.
And then occasionally we might take some selfies with the Polaroid. I think so occasionally we might have a battle, with each of us would have, or if there's two of us, for example, and we had a Polaroid each, we'd have a Polaroid war, who could photograph each other's face.
Nice.
And occasionally you'd put the Polaroid camera on self-timer and then throw it in the air and get a drone shot if the angle was right. So you'd have to time it.
When it's spinning around in the air.
We would always catch it. We'd always catch a Polaroid, but sometimes you'd have this fantastic sort of, we were ahead of our time. It was, before drones were a thing.
Drone shots. I love the Polaroid war idea. That's kind of like Jim and I used to have a similar kind of game at weddings, but we were in the digital times. So when we were shooting dance floors with flash, on-camera flash, doing like drag shutter shots and stuff on the dance floor at weddings, the game would be try and flash the other photographer in the eyes without them noticing at some point, to the point, so that they can barely see anything, so you'd be walking past, you just bang right in, and Jim did not enjoy that. It was fun though. I had a good time.
Done something
Just
similar.
very quickly, guys. Sorry to interrupt. I've just got to take a quick break. I'm going to leave you in Justin and Mark's capable hands, and I'll be back in just a moment.
We'll go to some comments and see.
Okay.
So David, the drunk wedding photographer, says that he only uses 35mm film because he's a stubborn grandpa. But he's in LA, which is currently sunny but chilly. Have you seen any drones flying over there the size of cars? I saw a news report. I don't know if there's any around LA, but I saw a news report that on the east coast of the US, people are sighting drones the size of cars, and no one knows what they are. So tell us, David, give us the lowdown from on the ground. Are there drones currently swarming the US and doing something? Or is it a conspiracy theory? Enlighten us. This is interesting. Actually, we should find out. I want to ask you about what sort of gear that you guys are using now, but David's still using the D700 for its Panasonic sensor. That D700.
We used the D700, and it was, it was a beautiful image that came out of it.
Because it got released in tandem with the D3, I think, and they both had the same sensor. I'm pretty sure that's right. The D3 being the pro sports body, and the D700 was kind of like its little brother. But I think they both had the same sensor, and everyone loved those two sensors. Like at the time, I think Canon had the 5D 1 or 2, or is like right in that area, which had more megapixels. But the D700, everyone preferred the look of, the rendering of, even though it had, I think it was only 12 megapixel or something. I'm trying to remember.
It was a bit smaller, but it
16
definitely
maybe.
Job.
Yeah. What gear are you guys using now? And do you use the same cameras like company wide? Like how does the gear side of things work when you got 40 photographers?
Good question. So we've for many years we were very Nikon based. The Fuji, obviously. Well, sorry, I'm not sure. I don't know if that's the case now or not. But the initial Fujis that we use, the S1s and 2, 3s and 5s, they were Nikon mounted. So we used Nikon lenses with them.
Okay.
And then we sort of went to a Nikon body, the D700, in fact, for our group photography, and then we've progressed with the Nikons as they've been released and got better and better and so forth. And then we went to we actually got Canon portrait cameras while we were using Nikon. People roll their eyes at that and think, well, why would you do that? But our very, very clever and creative color correctors were able to match with no problems. Yeah. But going into next year, we're all Canon, both for our group photography and our portraits.
Interesting. So would that have been a switch based on, like, where was it at the time to jump to mirrorless? Is that why that was a good time to switch from Nikon to Canon, or like how did that come about? Do you know, like the backstory of why?
I'm just trying to think. I mean, we get probably about 3 to 5 years out of our cameras, and then they start to wear down. In fact, some of our Fujis, this was actually quite interesting. When we actually retired the S5s, which we actually had for a long time, some of them had actuations of over 1 million.
Nice.
On the one shutter.
Yeah. They go for longer than you think. Like, we've ran some of the Jim ran one of his D750s, which wasn't even as robust a camera as something like a D700. They were a little bit more consumer grade. Yeah. And I reckon he had one of those close to 1 million. You were surprised how many you get out of a shutter. Sometimes they'll die early, but yeah, some of them just keep, like an older car, some of them just keep going.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Oh, look, it's a combination of, I suppose, cost, practicality, and all those kind of things that come into, because we're buying, so many.
Yes.
It's a big decision. It has to be, thought through pretty carefully.
Yeah, I can imagine there'd be a lot of quoting and back and forth of what if we did this option, what if we did that option, and assessing what the next 5 years looks like.
Yeah, but so we've actually made the leap into mirrorless for our group photography next year. So that's exciting.
What sort of cameras would they be if they're Canons? Are they like, do you guys go high megapixel like the R5 Mark II, or are they like, So we pick what cameras to use?
Well, when I went to my boss, who controls the purse string, so to speak, I was pushing for the R5 Mark II.
Mm-hmm.
But
good choice.
Yeah. But no, we went for the R6 Mark II. Yeah. And we tested prolifically. So we were using our Nikon group cameras were 810s and 800s. And they were doing a great job, but we were having some pretty significant tethering issues with them. Okay. So we had to sort of move them on. And I was actually blown away, because I have been DLSR for up until recently and hadn't even picked up a mirrorless camera at all. And it's wow. It's just just the tech behind it. It's kind of like driving a manual car, where you've got to be skilled with the clutch and changing gears and all that kind of stuff, to now sort of somewhat driving a Tesla, where there's a lot of automation and it's taking some of the thinking away. There was one of your guests a few weeks ago, and he was I can't remember who it was, but he was just talking about the skill of the photographer in ISO and shutter speed and f-stop and all those, the combination of the exposure triangle and just getting your way around the camera and setting up your buttons and all that kind of stuff. There's a skill to that, absolutely, 100%. But if the camera can take some of that away, so you can concentrate on maybe some of the more important things from a volume photography point of view, then bring it on.
Yeah.
I'm not precious like that at all. We over the years have done a lot of kinder photography and photographing, the activity photos of the preschools and so forth, which I've always really, really enjoyed.
Yeah.
But we take a fairly strong photographic approach to it. Sort of shallow depth of field, throw the background out of focus, and all those kind of things. But focusing on the eye, and I would miss shots all the time because the kid moves too quick, or the camera's not quick enough. So I've spoken to a few people that have used mirrorless for kinders and the eye tracking and things like that. I mean, that's a gift. You're not going to lose those moments. So I'm somewhat. I think my first R5 Mark II I picked up, and when I took the first photo and it came up in the viewfinder, I almost cried. It was just such a beautiful thing.
Yeah. Yeah, it is nuts. And it's sort of, so when we were shooting weddings, we went through that period of time where we sort of went from shooting with, I guess, safer lenses to getting a bit more risky and a bit more creative with things like the Nikon. I don't know, did you ever use the Nikon 105 1.4 lens?
No,
it was magic. Like, just it had that kind of thing. Like you say, you shoot it wide open and you just cry because you're like, oh my god, it's sharp, but it's just the creamiest. It was beautiful for weddings. And we started to get riskier and riskier with that sort of stuff. We were like, oh, maybe I'll shoot the bride walking down the aisle with a 105, which is wide open, and just, get something. And that was with a great camera like the D850, amazing autofocus. But you still felt like you were having to do work and be careful to try and get some shots in focus wide open with that lens. And then now it's like you put something like that on the R5 Mark II and it just locks onto the eyes and tracks them around this. You can almost shut your brain off and get sharp photos wide open. On that new camera. It's a different experience, that's for sure.
I had the good fortune of actually working for a different company for the last 3 days. I was at RMIT photographing their graduations, and yesterday I was on the floor. So I'm not sure if you're familiar with how RMIT do their graduation ceremonies. They do it at Marble Stadium. 9,000 students are all graduating at once. So there's 20 stages with about 500 in each stage, and so our role. So there's 20 photographers. That all go and photograph the graduate receiving, their scroll, if you like, with the chancellor of that particular faculty. And just the eye tracking was just fantastic. You could just really concentrate on, just capturing the moment, which is critical when it happens so quickly. You've got to, you can't be mucking around with the focus. It has to be doing its job, perfectly, so you can, get the moment really carefully.
Yeah, wow.
Yeah, because there's no do-overs with that sort of stuff.
No, absolutely not. It's funny though. It's a lot of the the high-end lenses and all those things you were talking about, Justin, with the shutter focus and all those kind of things, and creating those wonderful images and so forth as well. We occasionally, will employ a photographer that knows their way around photography and lighting and, all the creative stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And so what we do in volume photography, we have to keep things very, I suppose, uniform, but also quite simple to set up and pull down and things like that, because you just don't have time to be mucking around with, 5 lights, for example. But we, our end product is fantastic. There's no issue with that. We color correct really well. We put a lot of effort into the capture, the color correct, and the printing. Each stage we do very, very well. But we never, we don't have ratio lighting. We don't have hair lights. We don't, light the background and all those kind of things that you could do if you have the time and if you're creative and all those kind of things. But we never, ever receive comments from parents or teachers or students or, the customer saying, except photographers, why aren't you using this and why aren't you using that? It's sort of, it's actually quite funny.
Yeah, a lot of that stuff is for the photographer.
Oh, 100%.
Like and it was the same with us with weddings. I mean, arguably, like there are some moments with weddings where the background's distracting, you don't have control, you're not lighting anything. So being able to sort of obliterate the background with a lens like the 105 1.4,
of course,
what was useful. And the couples don't know that it's happening, but they just like what the images are or whatever.
Yeah.
But we shot for ages with just the old, a 15 to 35 or 16 to 35. It was then 2.8, or even we were using F4s for a while on one camera, and then the 7200 2.8 on the other camera, and everyone loved those photos too. Yeah,
I think was it Joel you had a few weeks ago?
Yep.
Yeah. Photographer.
Yeah, that was a great episode. I enjoyed listening to him talk about particularly just it's about the moments, and sort of and if so, film does that for him. And any good photographer that's capturing people, or photography in general, it's about moments, and so that's what it's about. I think. I mean, there's one school that we were challenged photographically, which I actually really enjoyed the challenge. We were asked to do location portraits. So rather than in the studio with the backdrop and all that kind of stuff, we're actually asked to use locations at the school. And this particular school had 5 campuses. So every school we had to find a location either inside or outside or whatever else, and it pushed us photographically. And one of the more challenging ones was photographing in a church, sort of up on the altar, showing the stained glass windows. So we did it a few ways over a few years. That we would have to sort of rely on the ambient light and then match that with the flash, and then adjust our shutter speed as the ambient light changed, in particular to pick up the detail of the stained glass windows. So we had to crank the ISO up, and so that was, and then you're working under pressure, the students are coming through very quickly, all that kind of thing. At one stage we actually set up lights outside to backlight the stained glass windows as well. So certainly not afraid to push ourselves creatively and photographically where needed.
But you don't need to do that just because you have the skills and this school's hired me to do this, I better set up 9 lights and backlight the windows when it's not required at all. You know what I see what you're saying. It's like but sometimes us as photographers, we get excited by the skills that we have and the knowledge that we have, and we want to just show it off all the time when it's often not required.
Time and place.
Time
and place. I did, however, on the flip side, I think from a creative point of view, I can't remember her name, for goodness sake, at BFOP. I saw her presentation. She did some work at Xavier College, where she was doing a residency as an artist there, and so her expertise is photographing portraits of people, but in there that she builds the set and so forth. Do you guys, can you help me out with her name at all?
No, I don't think I saw that. I don't think I saw that one.
Oh, but she would put so much effort into the design and the construction, particularly the design, and interview the person and get to know what their ins and outs were and so forth, and create these beautiful sets, very cinematic. We photograph at a few schools where they have a dining hall, because they might have borders on site and so forth. And in that dining hall will be all the Harry Potter portraits of the former headmasters and so forth. And they're all stunning, beautifully painted and whatever else. And I was thinking that, this particular photographer, should be in there photographing and doing, building those wonderful sort of cinematic sets and so forth.
Because that's an element of photography that's often forgotten about, is you can create the backdrop, you can create the background. It's not always just what can we control with our camera and our lights, but
there's a lot more to it.
It's certainly not something I have much experience with. I'm not very good at creating things. I'm better at documenting things.
But that's okay.
You've set up some good shots for Lucky Strap's products.
Yeah, but even then, I prefer to put them in a situation rather than trying to create a situation. I'm not good with okay, here's a blank desk. I'm gonna get props and create something that looks like, the way probably a lot of product photographers would normally work, where they're kind of starting off with a blank slate and then they create this scene. That's not me. I want to walk into like a weird looking shed or something and pop it on a shelf and be like, cool, that's the shot that I want.
When I judge at camera clubs, I sort of talk about, the process of photography and so forth, and a lot of the images that I see that are presented to me, and they kind of fall simply, I suppose, into 2 categories. As photographers, we either capture moments or we create moments. So, and there's some very talented camera club photographers that do still life, But I always say
Yeah.
to anyone that's submitting studio or still life, I always say to them, you only have yourself to blame because you're controlling every element of this photograph.
Yeah, it's terrifying.
So the pressure's on. So if you have that
Yeah.
blank slate and you've got to create, I understand what you're saying, Justin. It can be quite, it can be a bit intimidating. You know, if you're
Well, the pressing the shutter button's almost the last step in the process, isn't it?
Mm.
You know, you've got potentially hours of work beforehand to set up a still life fine art shot, especially with a model. There's a lot of work involved.
oh, absolutely,
You know, product photography is different because they behave and they stay still, your subjects. But when you're working with models or, you know, even people that set up fancy shot, like the whole, we're talking with Emily Black last week. Was that a couple of weeks ago. And you know, she started off doing newborn photography around the Anne Geddes period, you know, and it was all about building a narrative and then placing the baby in the last minute and then getting the shot while the baby was in the state of being calm and relaxed or whatever it was, because that's going to change in an instant, you know. Fascinating process.
I enjoyed that interview with Emily, or that episode. All your episodes are great, but I enjoyed the Emily one in particular because she was, as she said, the president of the Victorian chapter of the AIPP, and she was prolifically batting for us during COVID and lockdowns for volume photographers, specifically at points. She was fighting for all photographers, but in particular, she was fighting for the volume photography industry. So, yes, thank you, Emily, for all that hard work that you did back then.
So cool to hear those things that a lot of us don't realize are happening in the background, that someone's doing that work and advocating for people in the industry.
Yeah.
She was amazing.
Yeah.
Philip,
we had a good show with her.
Philip Johnson, who was at BFOP as well. I think the photographer was Karen Dobia.
Yeah, fantastic. There was a great. I really enjoyed her presentation and her work and ethos and whole process and so forth. So, Greg, I have a question for you. You said you're doing. You're doing a presentation at some camera clubs in regards to ethics.
Yes.
So I've had a chat to a few clubs about this, and I'm interested in your take on it. So occasionally I will judge images and rate them fairly highly because, you know, as an image alone, they're great, you know, and they are worthy of commentary and accolades if that's what the club wants me to do. Workshops. There's you know, there's a lot of photo walks and there's a lot of sort of workshops with models and so forth. And when I see these images come through, when I see images of models being photographed and so forth, and I have in the back of my mind, has the photographer created this from scratch and pressed the button as a result of their hard work? And quite often I will see there's a steampunk model that I've seen at numerous clubs across numerous competitions over the course of time, and so I know very well that they're you know, from a workshop. So I then have in the back of my mind, okay, well, the image is actually really good, but how much work has that photographer put into that image, and arguably how much of the image do they own? Now I don't talk to the club like this. It's just an inner dialogue I have, and maybe I'm going to be crucified for it. And I occasionally will speak to clubs about that as well. On the flip side, you know, sometimes clubs will have, you know, I don't know, a workshop where they'll bring animals to the club or insects and so forth. And I've definitely rated some of these images really high, but literally the photographer has just pressed the button. The lighting, the insect placement, the scene, the set has all been created by someone else.
Yeah.
Yes. Have I opened a can of worms?
You have, but it's a really tasty can. I think, you know, like I'm a street photographer. That's my fun, is documenting the human experience, as we talked about earlier, which is predominantly why I went to Japan 5 times, because I wanted to document how a place that I'm absolutely fascinated with, and it's kind of my spiritual happy place. I'm not spiritual at all, but it kind of feels like that to me when I go there. There's a lot of ethics around street photography, and who, you know, if I'm taking photos of strangers, you know, and they don't know about it or they don't approve it or whatever it may be, I don't seek permission. You know, where do I stand with that in terms of ethics and morals? But I think there's like a scale, I guess, in a way, with who owns the image, even in a staged setting like a camera club where they bring a great model in. They know that the model is great. The model knows how to do everything. They don't need much direction, but they're doing their own poses, you know. And so you're right, there is very little that the photographer has to do. But I think in other situations where the photographer, like our friend Ian Tan, who was a cosplay photographer, he ran the workshop at BFOP as well, and he's been on our show in the past. Good friend of mine, and I've watched him do cosplay photography. And yes, these people spend months prepping their costume. The photographer has nothing to do with it, that part of it. And they spend hours doing their hair and makeup and prepping their costume to then walk through the hall at Comic-Con and meet up with Ian. But what I think the photographer brings to those pre-prepared kind of interactions is their connection with the model, and I guess an understanding or an unspoken contract or a spoken contract around, this is why I'm doing what I'm doing, and this is why do you do what you're doing? You know, why do you dress in cosplay? What do you get out of it? What are your favorite fandoms? Like, and I would watch Ian work, and he would create a connection that had absolutely nothing to do with the photography. The taking the photo was the end product, but he still put in hard work to create that relationship, to gain the cosplayer's trust, to understand the lore around the character. You know, and it's the same with steampunk people. That's just another form of cosplay in a way. It's not necessarily attached directly to a fandom, you know, like Demon Slayer or Monster Hunter or Star Wars, but it's still there's still a story behind it, a narrative. So I think there's ethics in morals and ethics in photography can be a very muddy water, because we all bring to the table our biases and our experiences. And some people, for example, with street photography, some people don't agree with or think it's immoral and unethical to take strangers' photos without their permission. You know, and I've been accosted on the street for taking people's photos, and you know, I've seen one photographer almost get into a fist fight with a subject over it. But does that mean whilst it's perfectly legal, is it right to take photos of strangers without their consent? You know, there's a whole, it opens up that can of worms, that tasty can of worms about what is right and wrong in photography. I haven't written my talk, by the way. I'm just spitballing. But it is an interesting concept, because we also have the other side of ethics in photography that we didn't ask for, but we're getting, is the whole impact of AI. And also around how we edit photos. You know, more and more of our editing platforms, Lightroom, Photoshop, Capture One, they're embracing AI technology to make the process for us simpler, to take a lot of the thinking out of it. Does that mean that are we contributing to an AI generated world of photography? You know, are we, by using those, you know, like the AI denoise in Lightroom, for example, you know, it's saving us time, but can we really claim that we edited that photo completely? You know, so
but
yeah,
the same could be kind of applied to, you know, so as a analog film photographer, or as someone who started as a film photographer, particularly when I shot color negative, I would drop my film off to my favorite lab down here in Geelong, run by a very talented guy, Dick Saylor. And the images that I got back were always top notch. The skin tones were where they needed to be, and they were beautiful. Now, I didn't do that.
Yeah.
The lab did that.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's you know, a big discussion. We can talk about this for a long time, I suppose.
Yeah.
And it's a little bit different of a discussion to what you were talking about with when it comes to camera clubs, or even by extension, like larger photography awards, you know, what used to be the AIPP awards or whatever it was, you know, like those sort of larger awards. If you're taking a photo that has a model in it at a workshop, and the photographer that runs the workshop has set up the lighting, and there's also 10 other people that are taking shots, and they each get their 5 minutes or whatever, and the model knows how to pose. It's, on one hand, it is a little bit like you didn't really create that photo. Like if we stripped the equipment down and said, okay, start again, even with the same model, because the models are great. Like famous fashion photographers work with famous models all the time. That doesn't, just because that model knows exactly what to do. Actually, there's a good example of this. There's a YouTuber called Peter McKinnon. I don't know if you've ever heard of him.
Yep.
He's a famous YouTube guy, like 4 million followers or whatever. Photographer, good photographer, and great video maker. He got to shoot with, what's that actor's name?
Oh, that narrows it down.
Sorry. This story sucks, guys. You'll have to bear with me. I'll make the story better, I promise, when I figure out the dude's name. He's a little famous. What's that guy's name? I've literally got him here. He is... Anyway, doesn't matter. You guys will know because you've probably seen it on YouTube. Super famous actor. He got 5 minutes to shoot with him.
Yep.
And the actor knew exactly what to do. Like, because Peter McKinnon started by saying, you know, are you ready or whatever? And the guy said, just start shooting. I'll do it. Let this actor, and like mess with his head because he was very nervous as it was. And as soon as Peter McKinnon started taking photos, the dude was just doing the looks that he's done a million times for a million shots over his career. Hang on, let me bring it up. But that doesn't, like, that happens all the time in professional photography once you start working with actors and models and experienced people in front of the camera. So that doesn't necessarily mean the photographer isn't doing work. But
that's right.
That next extension of like, all right, there were 10 photographers here. And a workshop instructor set the lighting up. Everyone essentially took the same photos with slightly different compositions, and now we're submitting them for awards grading. I think if you know that as a judge, you've really got to then start just grading it purely on composition and sort of the things the photographer could control. But everything else is like, well, that could have been any scene set up by anyone else anywhere. So the only thing they were really controlling was composition. And I don't know. It also, I guess it's a Camera Club Awards thing. So it's
the stakes change.
That's right.
You know,
it's like,
for them, it's more of a learning experience and an
Exactly.
opportunity for everyone to try the same thing. But when you're doing something like you said, and I think Lauren said it's Kiefer Sutherland. Was that the actor?
Yes, that's
Thank
it.
you,
I was
Lauren.
trying to, so it was Peter McKinnon's dream to photograph this guy. He was getting a hat made off one of Peter McKinnon's friends, like this custom hat.
Yeah.
Ended up 5 minutes in the shop to do a shoot with him. And you just see, like, in that situation, as much as Peter McKinnon is quite a decent photographer, Kiefer Sutherland was the professional in that situation. Yeah. And made but, you know, the guy's still a photographer. He still took the photos.
He showed up with the camera.
He would have controlled. He would have controlled, obviously, the lighting and the choice of background and you know, the camera tech, all that kind of stuff as well.
All of that. He was shooting some stuff on film. So it wasn't like no one else set everything up for him. It wasn't that situation. Yeah. But I was just kind of sort of saying, like, with regard to, hey, it's this steampunk person who's great at, you know, posing and stuff because they've done it a million times. So they're going to do the look. It's not like the photographer had to sculpt them into a great pose or whatever. Yeah. But that happens at different levels for all photographers, depending on who they're working with.
And I think it comes back to what we said about what are the stakes and what's the context. You know, if you rock up to your local camera club and they've got and you also do a bit of commercial photography, and they post it to the group as, we're getting in X, she's a steampunk model, she's coming in, we're going to set up in the laneway behind the club because it's, you know, kind of a bit grungy, and everyone can have a chance to take photos. We'll have lights, we'll have, you know, all that sort of stuff. If you then go and use that, you end up capturing a good photo, and you then go and use it in your commercial work to, you know, promote a product, or it ends up on a billboard. Well, that's different, because that was never the agreement to begin with. And that's where your communication with whoever whether it's spoken or unspoken, whoever you're working with, is really critical, about establishing a context and understanding, you know, what do you want to get out of this shoot? And well, this is what I want to get out of this shoot. Is that okay with you? Does that meet your expectations of this experience? You know, photography should be experience for everyone involved. But you know, the question around ethics, which is, you know, why I keep putting off writing this talk, it's coming up very quickly. I've known about it for like 6 months, but it's coming up very quickly. It is such a can of worms. It's a big can.
Oh, sorry, go on, Gary. Finish your thought.
No, you're right. No,
I was just going to say,
you interrupted it now, so just
a similar but different context is, so in the wedding industry, there was always wedding workshops, styled shoots, and actual jobs. Oh, and there was second shooting for more experienced photographers.
Yep.
And you see tons of people putting images from workshops and styled shoots into their portfolio when they're newer photographers, and just pretending that they shot that wedding on, you know, like this amazing looking bride who's actually a model. They're literally shooting over the shoulder of a workshop instructor who's actually styling the model and making them move around and all that sort of stuff. And the same thing even with a second shooter. So there was this sort of unwritten rule that, and we always told everyone this and pushed the same sort of thing, that if you didn't actually get paid to shoot that wedding, or it's a styled shoot or whatever, it's simple. Share it, but you just have to say, that's all you have to do is say, I shot this while I was working as a second shooter for Jim, the wedding photographer. Or
and you have a conversation with Jim.
Yep.
Or the workshop instructor, and the models.
Exactly. And all the workshops that we went to always said the same thing. They were like, hey, this is totally cool. You can share this stuff on your website or your blog or your just simply say, I shot this while I was at a workshop with, you know, with this person. It was a great experience or whatever. Don't pretend that you shot the wedding, because you're then, it's false advertising, because you didn't actually, you might have pressed the shutter button, but you didn't do all of the work behind that. And it's particularly different on a wedding day, because it's very easy to get that shot when you've got unlimited time and a paid model, as opposed to you've got 20 minutes between the ceremony and the reception, you know, with someone who's not a paid model to try and get that shot. So it's like, don't set up false expectations for your customers was the main thing. Like you're literally doing yourself as a disservice, because they're going to expect this, but the reality is going to be this.
Yeah. And Jim has pretty much echoed that.
Exactly. Yeah.
Which is great. Yeah. And I think you're right. I mean, you know, we talk about morals and ethics in street photography. It's a really hot topic because everyone has become so much more aware of their rights. You know, back in the 50s and 60s, when street photographers were running around New York with you know, flashbulb cameras, shoving them in people's faces and actually documenting the shock value of being photographed, things were a bit different. The world was simpler.
Well, it was sort of like, where did that photo go? People were probably thinking, well, it's either going in a newspaper or, I don't know, just kind of disappears into someone's film collection. It wasn't going to get put on social media, you know. Yeah,
or the dark web, whatever that is. You know, it wasn't going to be used for inappropriate. It wasn't going to feed AI to create porn, or, you know, there's a lot more involved in having your photo taken these days. But someone in the chat made a very Paul Henderson made a very good point.
Sorry.
Stop it. Great question, Greg. I'm keen to do street, but not game for that reason. On the other side, they are happy to record everyone's life on their phones and sell or post to get likes and traction and all of that stuff, but they would be the first to complain if you walked up and took a photo. I agree with your sentiment. And, you know, when I've been doing street photography, I've been confronted by people saying, you don't have permission to take my photo. And my philosophy around that is it's not worth an argument. It's just a photo. It's just for my experience and my desire to document humanity interacting with a world that doesn't make sense. And, you know, and sometimes I'll say, well, it's fine. I don't have to keep it. I can delete it. I can show it to you, but I can certainly delete it. It's not a problem at all. But just so you're aware and you don't run into trouble in the future, I don't need your permission to take your photo on the street. I appreciate what you're saying. It means nothing to me to get rid of it. I do this as a hobby, and, you know, like you create context, you have a conversation. But people have become more aware. In some ways they've become more educated, and in other ways they've become easily fooled by fake news around fake news. I can't believe I said that. Around, you know, what we do and don't have a right to photograph as photographers. You know, like technically I can stand outside your house with a telephoto lens and take a photo of you getting out of bed in the morning, Justin. Not saying that's happened ever.
My blinds are closed.
Oh, well, yeah.
You must have a cool camera.
I do.
Remote camera inside your room.
Oh,
yeah. Shh, don't give up all my secrets, Mark. You know, but that doesn't mean I would do that. I don't stand outside Justin's house with a telephoto lens trying to capture a photo of his pee-pee. You know, I just don't. It's not in my wheelhouse. But I guess the point I'm trying to make is that even as a street photographer, I still have rules about who I will and won't photograph. Even though I have a right to photograph anyone I want, it doesn't mean that I abuse that privilege. I abuse that angle of the law that lets me do that. You know, I won't photograph children. I won't photograph anyone in a school uniform. I won't photograph homeless people unless I approach them and ask them, or they ask me to, or they choose to pose, you know, and get in the way, sort of thing. I don't photograph people that, for a couple of reasons, that are clearly affected by drugs, substances, or situation, because I don't think it's fair necessarily, but also I prefer to avoid conflict. And I live in a city, you know, there's a lot of rough people around, and you've got to be careful too. So I guess it's about the context of what you're doing and why. Yeah. That's a long answer. Sorry, Mark.
No, that's all right.
Circling back to the kind of effort, I guess, effort versus points kind of side of things. And you mentioned it about film photography. You know, you used to drop it off and it would just get done and they looked amazing. And does that affect? So how important, from a judging point of view, how important is how I created the photograph to judging the photograph purely with no backstory? Here's the picture. Tell me about it. Because even it's a shame. This is the first week that I haven't had any photos to submit. This would have been fun. Sorry to let you down. You know, like a lot of the weeks that I've done this 12 image challenge, I've shot JPEG straight out of camera. And I always mention that because it's harder. So the fact that the photos may not be perfectly composed or whatever, the horizon's ever so slightly crooked or something, I felt it important to tell people, hey, I shot these JPEGs straight out of camera. But from a judging point of view, does that matter, or is it just still like, hey, that's not good? Do you understand what I'm trying to say? So it's sort of like, hey, you know, how much control did you have over this process, and does that affect the score that you would give? Like if I said, hey, I shot this, I didn't use my hands, I operated the camera with my mouth to shoot this photo, would you be like, okay, well that actually, I'm gonna award it more points than I otherwise would have. You know, if you had said I had a team of 20 photographers helping me capture this image, you might say, well, it could probably be better than what it is then, because, you know, does that make sense? How important is how hard, the backstory of how hard it was to capture that photo, you know, workshop versus,
if I photograph an open competition, which means that any genre, there's no locked offset subject, any image can go in. So I suppose firstly I'm looking for images with impact, with a bit of depth, with a sense that I can see that the photographer has got an eye and has captured a moment by doing this, that, or the other. And the difficulty of the particular genre, so there's different kinds of photography that require different skills, so that comes into it as well. I'm acutely aware though that camera club people, some don't have access to post-production, and sometimes those images come in and they're flat and they need a tweak and whatever else. So and I think why I do well as a judge is that I'm very diplomatic, and I'm encouraging, and because I understand how camera clubs work, in that they're enthusiasts, and there are professionals in camera clubs because they like the camaraderie and the relationship building and being around people and photographers and so forth. But there are people in there that don't have the facility for post-production, so I'm very lenient on those images. But I will suggest, well, if you had done this, if you had the facility in post-production, I understand that you don't, or not everyone does, but it would be worth considering doing those kind of things. So I think the way I judge at a camera club is very, very different than I would for a professional kind of competition and so forth as well. Okay. But I would challenge, Justin, I really like your approach, with what you're doing with your weekly challenge and so forth as well. But I'll go back to the point that in the film days, you would drop your film off and it would be processed, and you would have it looking pretty schmick. The exception to that would be black and white. Unless you got someone to print it for you, you would have to print it yourself. But generally, photography in the film days always, when they ended up being a print, had processing. There was no sort of just straight out of camera. That's a modern digital statement.
It's also a bit of a myth too.
The exception to it is absolutely. The exception would be shooting transparency, where there is no there's no post-production whatsoever. You had to get it completely right in camera, and that's as a photographer how I learned. I actually learned the discipline of shooting transparencies. You had to shoot to print, you had to shoot, you had to crop. There was no post-cropping, there was no post-production, there was nothing. So that's probably the only parallel I can see with with what you're doing. I listen to your podcast more than I watch it because I do a lot of driving with work. However, I did see your episode, I think with your first set of 12 images from Vietnam.
Okay.
The green theme, I think it was.
The green theme, yes.
Yeah, and they were great images. So
thank you.
Maybe what you should do is that...
That's so nice of you to say, Mark.
Maybe what you should do for those that can only listen to the show is have the critique of Justin's images at the 1 hour mark, so I can then go onto YouTube and go to that point every week. I've listened to it, and now I'll just go and jump in and see your images at a particular time.
Yeah,
that's a good idea.
That's a good idea.
That's a really good idea, Mark.
I've thought about making them into separate videos because we can just take that clip and upload that as its own.
Yeah.
Oh, you can put a timestamp in or something.
Yeah, we're going to do
that.
We can put a timestamp.
We're looking at all of those things for the new year. Yeah. Mark, I have a question regarding your judging experience over the years. And have you noticed, just in general, do you think that, judging clubs, sticking at a club level, which, as you said, are mostly enthusiasts, a few amateurs, a handful of pros, do you think the quality of photography has improved over the years? Or do you think there's a consistency of output that comes through? The reason why I'm asking is that, compared to, say, early digital and especially analog film cameras, current gen digital cameras, as we've talked about, make photography simpler and easier to get stunning outcomes purely through the gear, more so than skill. Like I just looked at... Panasonic are launching or have just announced a brand new cropped Micro Four Thirds camera. It's an entry-level enthusiast level. No, it's an entry-level camera, but it has image stabilization, and the image that you can set it to actually shift the sensor to create a perfect horizon line. in every shot, even if your camera is tilted slightly. So if you think, oh yeah, like I'm going to grab it, it's pretty close, I've got my image stabilization on, it's going to shift. It's actually going to shift the image and make it straight for you. You know, so that's just one little...
Action cameras already do that. That's interesting. Yeah, like GoPros and stuff have that, obviously more for footage, not for photos. That's an interesting feature to put in. That I've never... that's very clever.
So it is clever, but, you know, composition, especially knowing where the horizon is one of the fundamental... I mean, it's a fundamental aspect of human existence, that we look to a horizon to gauge where we are and how we are positioned in the world. And photography is no different, right? Because that's, you know, we use horizon for reference and context and scale. You know, are images getting better because of the quality of cameras is improving?
Well, I think since I've been judging, I think work in camera clubs is definitely getting better. Which is great. I think that's a really, really good thing. And I think the quality of cameras definitely allows for better technical image making. No question.
Yeah.
And so I do a presentation and I talk a lot about this when I judge, is that we're at a point now, I think, where like traditionally camera club, and particularly back in the very early days when I started judging, it was very technical because it had to be, because, you know, the learning curve of film and understanding all those kind of things was fairly critical. You know, if you didn't understand the technical, you weren't going to get an image that was acceptable.
Yeah.
So yeah, my advice to new photographers nowadays would be is that you can actually concentrate your learning curve in the creative side first. Forget the technical stuff. You can shoot in all the different various auto modes that all the different models have quite effectively. And you can, you know, and I always encourage, you know, train your eye, you know, look at the art side of what you're doing, you know, rather than the technical side. So when I judge, to get back to your question, if I see a technically perfect image that's cold, as in, you know, it doesn't have any heart or warmth or a story or something like that, well, I can judge it on the technical elements, but I'm interested in being moved by an image. Now, there's some genres of, you know, of photography that doesn't, you know, not every image has to move you. That's, you know, that's fairly obvious. But I enjoy seeing images that, you know, that tell a story, have captured a moment, or as I said, a moment has been created. You know, I'm interested in storytelling. I you know, when I judge, I go on these rants, how I imagine what has happened either prior or after the photo's been taken. And quite often I will engage with the photographer if they're there and ask the question, you know, what's the backstory or what's happened.
Get the context.
So I'm a judge that's very, very much based on the storytelling element and capturing moments, you know, of humanity or whatever it might happen to be. You know, it just depends on the image and so forth. But I think there are lots of technically proficient images in camera clubs, and that's as a direct result of the technology.
Yeah.
But I push camera club people in my critiquing and in my presentations into go beyond that, you know, and look for opportunities to capture a feeling or a moment that hopefully can be enjoyed by the viewer. You know, there's this whole thing, I think, with, you know, and you would have experienced this in Japan, Greg, you know, when you're overwhelmed, your senses are overwhelmed by wherever you may happen to be. As a photographer, and one of your aims is to capture that moment, that feeling, and all those senses that bombard you, the way you see and hear and smell and all those kind of things. If you can encapsulate that into a photograph and let that viewer experience that, I think you're halfway there on doing your job.
Yeah, true.
And that's
it doesn't even have to be a technically good photo.
No. In fact, I've judged, you know, recently images that are soft. And I'll say, look, this isn't technically perfect, but wow, what a feeling this has got. Fantastic. Well done.
Yeah.
You know, it doesn't have to be always technically perfect to be a good image. So
just for the record, Mark, and for everyone listening at home, I don't have to go all the way to Japan to become overwhelmed. I just get overwhelmed getting out of bed every morning by the sights and the smells and the sounds. So it's not location specific for me. Well, you know, Sasha, she's she's lovely, but she's very gassy. Love you, babe. Moving on. Moving on.
Dear.
Just want to let everyone at home know if you're watching along, you're listening, or watching along, you're listening. If you're watching or listening along, this is the Camera Life podcast. It's episode 40. What did I say it was? 43? How did that happen? 43, 19th of December. We're talking to Mark. I won't try to butcher your surname because
Bloothoofd.
Just
Bloothoofd?
make sure that the two syllables sound the same.
Which ones?
Bloot. How the same? Bloothoofd.
Bloothoofd.
Bloothoofd. Oh, okay. Thank you.
That's it.
We're talking to Mark. And just another reminder that the Camera Life podcast is brought to you by the lovely team at Lucky Straps in Bendigo, Victoria. 100% Australian-made camera straps. If you're a photographer, might not get it in time for Christmas now, Justin.
Look, depending on where you are in the world, it would be a slim chance. Quite
But
slim.
trip to Bendigo.
That's or that's not to say that after Christmas surprises aren't welcome.
That's right.
You
We
know,
will be
sometimes
shipping. We will be shipping it tomorrow.
Sometimes
as
there's
well.
romance in the anticipation of a new strap arriving. Oh, I should write blogs. Check out the Lucky Straps website. Is there still a sale on? Was the sale over?
We got some deals on some stuff. Go and have a look.
Yeah,
They're
go have a
there.
look. Check it out.
Go
Anyway,
check,
thanks for
go to the
sponsoring
website. Oh,
today's show.
Look at our fancy business
I
cards.
know. I love mine.
Oh, it's not going to focus. These damn Canons.
Actually, I sent some.
It wants a face.
I sent some camera straps that I had here that you've given me to a winner of a photo competition at a club, and I was proud to put my fancy Lucky Straps card in there. Oh, Lauren!
Nice.
Lauren has a strap arriving today.
What brand is it, Lauren? I'll have
Yeah.
to kick you off the chat if it's not one. No, I'm kidding. It's all
Yeah.
right. I'm sure it's one of ours.
Is it coming from Bendigo, Lauren? Let us know.
Should be. Just quickly, me pop now says digital has made it much easier and quicker to learn due to instant feedback. I 100% agree. I didn't take up photography until digital was around, and I since have shot film. I don't believe I would have made it to the point of being a professional photographer if it was film. I think the instant feedback for my learning style was what enabled me to progress, and I don't think I would have had the patience to do that with film. I know you guys can probably talk more to it, but I think there was a lot more documenting your settings, all of that kind of stuff in the learning process to go, what went wrong, what went right. I think I would have lost that by the time I got my film back. I would have thought, I can't remember what I did with that one or whatever. Yeah. And I think that learning loop wouldn't have worked for me.
I think also at the time when, like Mark and I were shooting film, we didn't have YouTube. We didn't have Instagram. We didn't have access to the internet at all. My media at the time was carrying a little notebook and a pencil. So I'd write down my settings and I'd write down what film and what came out of it and what the teacher had said. And, I wasn't getting feedback and likes off social media. It was very analog, the whole end-to-end process. The other thing nowadays is that we have access to all of those things. We have access to watch YouTube videos until the cows come home. There's so much content about photography on YouTube, you'll die before you watch it all. As macabre as that sounds. And so there's so much more to learn, and we can absorb that very quickly on the way to work, lying in bed at night, anytime. It doesn't have to be a set. We go off and learn how to use a camera in a classroom or online or via correspondence, if you're from the Stone Ages like Mark. And, it's a very different world. And this is why we see these influencers, young kids running around the world with, expensive cameras making content. Because it is very easy to learn digital photography, and the cameras are getting smaller.
Even with my learning curve, because I was shooting transparency in film, when I was doing my personal stuff, my growth was it was pretty slow compared to what it would be now. And I think even since digital, my photography has improved tenfold as well because of that instant feedback as well. I know there's a yearn.
It takes so much longer too. Everything. You had to wait till you got into the dark room and you had enough to actually warrant getting the chemicals out. And I, you know, when I first started film, I was a poor student living out of home. Like, you know, my friend and I built a dark room in his parents' ensuite. Like, you know, it was, you know, it was, and so we were juggling. Do we buy chemicals or do we buy beer? Like, you know, there was serious life-altering decisions. Exactly.
Did you ever get confused by the two?
Well, I have said this story before.
Run out of beer.
My friend Luke, who's still into photography, we went to high school together, and we turned his parents had a holiday house, and they'd pretty much retired and moved to their holiday house. So we turned their ensuite into a dark room. We painted it black, and because it had plumbing already in there, we pulled out the shower stall, and we put in a bench that went sort of 2/3 of the way around the room. And above the bench was all photography, and below the bench was homebrew. It was our homebrew experiments. And every now and then we'd be working on, you know, in the dark room, and we'd start to hear bottles pop because it had gotten too hot or too cold in the room. And, you know, so yeah, that were fun times. Good way to learn.
The olden days.
The olden days.
The olden days. Did you also get the horse and cart to school?
No, there's no need for that. No need for that,
come
Justin.
on. Just the odd little jab, Santa. Frog's back. He says, Merry Christmas, guys. Did he miss any giveaways? Maybe a Canon R1? No, we didn't give away an R1 on this episode, unfortunately. Actually, you'd probably be sad if we said we did and you missed it. So don't worry about that. And Lauren says she's been wanting a wrist strap for ages, but she didn't get it customized and has regrets. You can always send it back to us after Christmas, and we can stamp something on it. So don't worry about that.
Yeah. Just let us know.
Just let us know. Mark, what else are you up to? Is there anything else you want to talk about while you're on this podcast?
Yeah.
What other cool stuff in the photography world have you been up to? Or you got any projects you're working on? Anything coming up?
Well, I've always, when I'm photographing for myself, it's not really been project based. It's just been kind of go for a drive, find something or whatever else. But I must admit, you guys have kind of inspired me a little bit. I think both through what you guys talk about, but also some of your guests in, you know, passion projects and things like that. So that's something that I'm kind of sort of formulating in my mind, I suppose. To do.
Mark, you've just made my day. You know why?
Yes.
Because Justin and I didn't start this podcast to become Insta famous or YouTube celebrities. We didn't start this podcast to just talk about what we wanted to talk about. We didn't start this podcast to promote Lucky Straps and bring customers to the business. We started this podcast, or reignited this podcast, to give back to the photography community. And you're saying that you and some of our guests has created inspiration for you to do something new and unique. That tells me that we've won. That what we set out to do, that's exactly what we set out to do. So thank you for saying that, because we're not here for the glory. We're here for photography and photographers.
It's worthy of sound effects.
Go on. With the horns. There it is.
Oh, look, I think it's interesting because I think photography can be such a solo pursuit, and to encapsulate a little community like I think what you're doing is a great thing. So keep up the good work, gents.
So
Thank you.
You're thinking, is any idea of a project crossed your mind, or are you just thinking a project would be cool, or you got something that potentially in mind, or something for 2025 you think you might maybe, or a trip or something like that?
Yeah, not quite sure. I think direct photography alone. A dream that I've had, and I've never shared this with anyone, I don't think, to be perfectly honest. So over the years, I've one particular photographer friend, a very talented press photographer, Phil Biggs from the Launceston Examiner. We used to do a lot of slideshows, sort of create a slideshow with our images. In fact, it was very funny. We had two projectors. We had a bit of cardboard with it's like a saw sort of thing, and we'd put the cardboard over one projector and then pull it away and then cover the other one and sort of have photos fade in from each other and so forth. Nice. And then we'd have a video camera filming the screen and playing a CD, recording it. It's just, it was ridiculous. It was just that was the only way we could do it back in the day, though.
That's awesome.
So obviously there's a lot of digital ways to create sort of audio visuals now and so forth as well. Really powerful, simple tools. It's crazy. But I remember being very inspired by a visit to Kakadu in the 90s when Steve Parrish in the visitor centre had this fantastic slideshow, multiple screens, multiple carousel projectors, which were the bee's knees of projectors back in the day, and they were somewhat programmable, I think. And it was multi-screen, all these images going up beautifully. It would be fantastic to create an audio visual, multiple screens in a big sort of theatre with a live orchestra. How's that?
Whoa.
Wow.
Okay, that's
Imagine that.
dreaming big.
That's
I love
dreaming. I like that a lot.
That's so cool.
So
Okay.
whether that happens or not, I don't know. But sometimes just the process of dreaming is enough. But
That's a really great idea. Gosh, you know how to go big or go home.
Man, imagine if that was like, you know, because with an orchestra and that, so you'd imagine if you had 8 to 10 photographers that each had a song, like a piece with their artwork, their creative vision. And they're not necessarily all related or whatever, but it's almost like a each person gets sort of 3 to 5 minutes of expressing their own imagery however they want, and then it sort of flows on to the next and the next, and maybe there is a theme throughout the whole thing or something like that. You could pull together a show based around that.
But rather than just having one screen, you have multiple screens with multiple images all sort of happening at once and creating a really visceral sort of experience.
That's very cool.
I also, it would be the Steve McCurry exhibition in particular, warmed the cockles of my heart, which I saw earlier in the year. His images, are great. Did you see that, Greg, down in Williamstown?
No, I didn't.
What impressed me mostly with his exhibition was the gallery space, which was the old dock thing down there in Williamstown. All the walls were black, but all the lights were cut to a point where the light just hit the images. And I've seen that in a few exhibitions. I think the War Memorial in particular do that extremely well. And I'm sure there's galleries everywhere, and the lighting technology's everywhere. But I've had this whole kind of philosophy. 1 + 1 is not 2; it's 3. You have good images in a good presentation or collaboration, and then you have a greater entity. And like a audio visual presentation with an orchestra might make a 4 or 5. Maybe not just a 3.
Yeah. No, that's amazing. That's a very, very cool idea. Thank you for sharing that with us.
Do it. Do it.
Yeah, do it. Make that your goal for 2025.
All right, here we go.
All right.
Is there any composers out there?
I know some.
Yeah,
I know one actually. He's composed for movies and for other musicians. I do know a good composer.
And a lot of the soundtracks that I've done in the past for these, audio visuals were always cinematic. They were always soundtracks for movies.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh, interesting. All right. Well, we talk after the show. Speaking of which, it is 11 Australian Eastern Daylight Savings Time. And we might look at wrapping it up. Mark, we could talk all day with you about this stuff that we do, this image making, reaction generating, medium that we've chosen to dedicate our lives to. Given the time, do you want me to just jump a couple of quick news articles, Justin, that are a couple of headlines before we wrap up?
Up to you, unless you want to save them for the next show we do. We'll just do a news only show. Depends how timely they are.
I'll just give you a couple of quick recaps. A couple of industry things that are happening. So Voigtlander have just dropped a new 90mm f2 for M mount. Nothing outstanding, but they've also dropped a 28mm 1.5 for Sony.
Oh, that's cool.
So Voigtlander, I didn't know that Voigtlander was owned by a Japanese company. What is it? Corsair, something like that. Corsair? No, anyway. The other bit of news that I thought was really interesting, and we've talked about immersive Apple Vision Pro stuff in the past, is that Blackmagic have just announced what's called the Blackmagic Ursa Cine Blackmagic Ursa Cine immersive dual lens cinema camera. It has dual 8K lenses.
Yeah.
So 8K for one eye and 8K for the other, and it's dedicated. And they've even developed their own software to pair with Apple Vision Pro.
This is where it's going. It's definitely heading that direction. I don't know what it's going to look like and how long it's going to take, but take notice if you want to be on the front foot for whatever the next iteration of sort of audio visual is. It is going to be immersive vision, and that's why it's cool to see Canon like on the front foot with multiple lenses now.
They were one of first.
Yeah, and you can put it on your regular camera. You don't need to buy a
R series.
Your regular R series camera. Yeah. But they even have a lens now for crop censored R series cameras, so you don't have to spend a fortune to start producing that content. But the fact that Blackmagic are doing it means that that's pretty big. Yeah.
And the Blackmagic camera, the lenses are fixed. It's not like they're taking one of their existing Ursas. Like, they've got a 17K camera in the Ursa range.
So they've made it there's no swap. It's literally that you buy fixed. This to do this one thing. This is what it's one for. Job.
And I think it was about 18,000 US.
Probably US. Ugh.
No, sorry, I take that back. It's 30,000 US dollars.
Bargain.
Yeah, absolutely. Let's get to.
That's 400,000 Australian dollars.
Yeah.
Or one Bitcoin.
1.6 million. Yen. So it's just an interesting development that a really reputable brand like Blackmagic are developing this, not as an add-on to an existing camera system, but a whole new platform. And it has dual 5-inch touchscreens, so you don't have to fit a monitor. You can obviously, but it's got these dual touchscreens. So depending on how you set up the camera in a rig, you can access it from either side. It's really quite a powerful piece of kit. But at that price, I don't think it's going to be in my Christmas stocking this year.
Probably not.
The only other thing, Nikon Z9 dropped a firmware update. It adds tilting shutter for video. I don't fully understand that technology, but apparently it's been long, because the Z9 is the flagship and it does amazing work in videography. And now it offers tilting shutter to further support videographers and cinema filmmakers, which is pretty cool.
Okay. And
it's not firmware you have to send the camera back into the store to get fixed like the Canon APS-C.
Did you see that, Mark, that Canon have on their APS-C cameras introduced a paid firmware upgrade that be perfect for volume photography? It's like guides for
it just has frame lines.
Well, they say it on their website. It is for volume photographers.
Yeah.
No, that's very exciting.
You've got to send it back into Canon to get it applied, you have to buy it with the firmware at a higher price.
Yeah.
I overlooked those details. I just saw what is potentially a bit of a game changer.
I can imagine for you guys to have consistency across hundreds or thousands of images.
So our photographers, we encourage, we train them to shoot to print. We don't post crop. We don't. Our workflow doesn't allow for it. So our photographers, unfortunately, they do a great job. However, the cameras don't have really great sort of internal in the grid lines. It's not perfect. So there's kind of photograph review. Retake kind of thing. Something like that's a game changer. So I can look past.
It seems simple. It's just odd that you have to send the camera back in to get it done.
Oh, that's true. It's a bit odd.
It seems like it's something that they should just roll out across every camera they make if they've got the capability to do it. Wouldn't that be a massive boon for?
Well, back in the film days with the so these fantastic cameras, if I can pull it apart, it's stuck, had a prism that you could take off and take out the focusing screen really easily. And so we would actually draw on the focus screens. You probably can't see it.
Oh,
that's
wow.
awesome. So you just put your own guide in there.
Yeah, so we did that prolifically.
Did anyone draw a dick? Did anyone draw a dick on someone else's camera? Tell me they did. Missed opportunity.
Thoughtful content.
That would have gone
back to grade school. You're an idiot.
Imagine if you looked through like ready to shoot. Mark.
I've been done again.
Yeah.
That would have been
Well, look,
awesome.
on that note, I think we're going to wrap up. But first and foremost, I just want to say a huge thanks, Mark,
Thank you.
Bloothoofd,
Thanks, Vince.
for joining us today and for sharing so much of your story and your insight, your knowledge, and your understanding of the craft that we all love and take part in. Where can people check out your work? We haven't even looked at a single one of your images. I've just realized.
That's all
Where
right.
can people check
what
out
have
your
we
work?
done?
I know.
I have a little Instagram page that I post my personal work to. So it's
It should
Mark
be linked below. Yeah. I think. Sorry, go on. What?
Mark _ Bloot BLOOT _ photog FOTOG, or just look for Mark Bloothoofd and you'll see some of my images there. So
Nice.
Very nice.
Yeah, we didn't even get a chance to scan through. We did that last week as well. We just got too busy talking. We didn't look at any photos.
That's all right. It's better for the audio listeners.
It's good for exactly. Then that's the category I fall into. And speaking of audio, let's just hear some beautiful sounds.
Oh, nice! Listen to that.
And then
someone give me a towel.
Hand, be quiet for this one.
How's that?
Nice. Oof. I'm gonna sample that for my my sound pad.
Very good.
Clunk, isn't it? And you
feel it, right? Yeah. Just the engineering, very impressive.
Yeah. I used to always love the shutter sound of pro digital bodies, like the 1 series Canons and stuff like that. And I do miss shooting electronic shutter sounds. I don't like at all. I like a nice clunk. I don't care if it makes the image less sharp. Very quickly, Greg, you can probably answer this. Buzz Adven is saying they're talking about the new refreshed Lumix cameras. Is that what you were talking about with the?
I think it's the Panasonic Lumix ZS 99 or 97, something like that. It was only announced a couple of days ago.
Yeah.
Stay tuned for that. They've announced that and another compact point and shoot at the same time. But other than that, the news has been mostly about sales the last month. Sales, deals, cashbacks, offers. There seems to be, just from my observation, because I deal with this stuff every day, there seems to be a real, I'm going to call it greed from a lot of the big retail places, that they're just like, this morning I'm receiving emails saying Boxing Day sales starts early.
So
I'm getting sales for Boxing Day now.
Yeah, I wouldn't look at that as greed. I would potentially say that. I mean, if the deals are good, the deals are good. So I wouldn't look at it as greed, but I would say maybe it actually is more so
desperation.
Desperation, is what I would say. Maybe sales haven't been quite as good as they'd hoped, so they're pushing it harder. Everyone's trying to compete, and unfortunately, it's a lot of noise and a lot of the deals haven't been amazing.
And I think that's my problem. Like, I'm sympathetic to businesses like yourself, like small local. You've got more to lose than the bigger brands who have that padding, especially when they're joined to a big global corporation. But like, I got an email from Big W, and for our overseas viewers and listeners, Big W is it's like Kmart and Target,
like Walmart.
Yeah, pretty much. But this morning I got an email from them saying, Boxing Day sale starts now. It's like,
it's weird.
Christmas, come on. And Black Friday felt earlier for a lot of places. They tried to get the jump on Black Friday and said early Black Friday sale, and then early Cyber Monday and early Wacky Wednesday. And what did I call it last week? Taco Tuesday.
Yeah, it's like just stick to, like, that's what we do our family sale. But then when it's Black Friday, our sale starts on, I think I started technically on Thursday night because I didn't want to do it Friday morning. But it started on Friday. It's Black Friday. Don't do Black November. Come on.
Yeah.
Let's just focus.
I don't know. I think I'm becoming a bit more cynical in my age. I'm becoming a bit more. Shut up!
I wouldn't.
Shut up! That's not fair. Anyway, on that note. I'm going to end the show.
Okay. I'm going to see if I can get this.
Thank you again.
Thank you.
We would love to have you back on in the future. We're looking at having a bit of a group podcast with some fellow photographers like yourself that have judged competitions, or perhaps we'll do one with people that do volume photography work and just have a roundtable conversation about the ins and outs of those.
Well, I keep thinking, I'm getting to the point now where I'm starting to think maybe we need to start doing like a weekly critique segment. Not that much critique. What I was thinking, because when we're talking about other people's, like judging people's images and stuff like that, like constructive feedback on people's images, including mine, but like just anyone, listeners, anybody that wants to submit an image, you know, whoever wants to pop on can help give people some constructive feedback, like you do with camera clubs. And then if they want, they can tick a box that also says roast me. And if they tick that box, it means they're willing for us to absolutely just tear it apart in a fun way. Yeah, I'd be happy for my images to get roasted. I think that'd be quite funny.
I think that'd be fun.
So maybe we'll a new segment next year too with some of these. Maybe. We've had a few judges on, and they're all. It would be great to see if we can give some of that knowledge to people without if they don't have access to a camera club or something like that. We might be able to do it on the show. So
sounds good. All right.
Yeah. Any final words, Mark?
Thanks for having us. Thanks you for having me, gents. Yeah, it's been good.
Oh, anytime. It's been a blast.
Anytime.
We love it.
And with that, let's get some Christmas music going.
Here we go.
Oh, it's building. I can feel it, people.
Merry Christmas.
Merry Christmas. Be safe. Happy holidays. All of that. Bye, everyone.
All right. Goodbye.